You need to find out what your ministry is and fulfill your ministry and be open to other people misunderstanding it and not supporting it. But if you have some people who are close to you and they know you and they walk with God and they can help you verify and go in that direction, you just do that and things are going to be just okay or great.
Well, hey, podcast family, and welcome to episode number 294 of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Bare Tongue Advisors. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope you'll enjoy our content and become a subscriber. And if you've been listening to us for a while, thanks for being a listener, and it would mean the world to me if you would leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whatever app you listen to podcasts through. That really does help us grow our audience and reach more leaders, so thank you in advance for that. In today's episode, you'll hear my conversation with Brian Tome. If you're unfamiliar with Brian, let me just tell you a little bit about him. Brian is the founding and senior pastor of Crossroads Church, 2017's fastest growing church in America. Brian's authored 4 books, including his bestseller, The 5 Marks of a Man. He also hosts the Aggressive Life podcast. As an entrepreneur, Brian has opened several other nonprofits and started Man Camp, which is a primitive weekend camping experience that has helped tens of thousands of men reclaim the code of manhood. As an avid adventure motorcyclist, Brian rides tens of thousands of miles and camps more than 30 nights each year. Brian has also released an adventure ride TV show called Phantom Lake, which is available on Amazon Prime. He's married with 3 children and lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I met Brian through one of my mentors, Denny Pattyn, and Denny's been on this podcast and he recently passed away. But Denny was the one who actually led Brian to Christ when he was a young man, and he became a mentor to him. And, I just read Brian's bio, which is really, really impressive, and Brian's doing a lot of great things today. But as you listen to this interview, as you listen to what Brian's doing, I want you to think about that everything Brian is doing today is the result and can be tied back to someone, specifically Denny, influencing his life. And so, leader, I just wanted to remind you that as you influence and develop other leaders, you never know who you're investing in. You never know who you're influencing, and you have no idea what they're going to do with the leadership that you instill with them. I'm sure when Denny was investing in Brian as a young man, he had no idea what Brian was going to be able to do with his life. And it's just amazing to see that. So I just want to encourage you, leaders, keep investing in leaders. Keep investing in young leaders. You have no idea who you're influencing. And as for the conversation, you're going to love this conversation with Brian. You're going to hear Brian talk about adoption. He was actually adopted, and he shares some thoughts on that. He talks all about leadership. He talks a lot about failure. He had some really interesting insights on failure that I loved. We talk about character development, and probably one of the biggest things that I got out of this interview is Brian talking about why it's so important to focus on your ministry, and you'll hear him talk about that. I think you're going to love this episode, but before we get into the conversation, just a few announcements. This episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast is sponsored by Bare Tongue Advisors. The financial advisors at Bare Tongue Advisors help educate and empower clients to make informed financial decisions. You can find out how Bare Tongue Advisors can help you develop a customized financial plan for your financial future by visiting their website at baretongueadvisors.com. That's BERATUNG advisors.com. Securities and investment in products and services offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Bare Tongue Advisors, LPL Financial, and L3 Leadership are separate entities. I also want to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. They're a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny. And my wife, Laura, and I got our engagement and wedding rings through Henny Jewelers, and we just loved our experience. Not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. In fact, every couple that comes in to get engaged at their store, they give them a book to help them prepare for marriage, and we just love that. So if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out hennyjewelers.com. And with all that being said, let's dive right in. Here's my conversation with Brian Tome. Well, hey, thank you, Brian, for being willing to do this interview. And why don't we just start off with you just telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
My name is Brian Tome. I was born at a very early age, and then I was adopted, which is actually part of my spiritual story as well, not just my physical and family story, but my spiritual story, because I got adopted into a family. It was at birth, but still physically I was adopted into a family that models spiritually what happens to us when we get adopted into the family of God. No one is naturally born into the family of God. All of us who are in the family of God, there's a moment when we are adopted into the family of God. That's That's the New Testament portion of the Bible makes really clear. So that whole thing of inclusion and bringing more people into the family has been a driver of mine for my whole life. Whether it was new kids coming into the school year halfway through and me wanting to befriend them, or whether it's now leading a church that's pretty big. It's pretty big because we just want to draw more and more people in to be in our midst and be with God. So started a church in 1996 called Crossroads in Cincinnati that has a bunch of different locations. And coming out of that, we also starting some other nonprofits, just spinning things off to be about more than just gathering in a building. We started some other nonprofits, City Link Center that helps the working poor, Ocean, Unpolished, which are entrepreneurial efforts for people who want to start their own businesses or take their business public. Also, camping ministries. We do a thing called Man Camp, which we most recently drove 32 different states, 1,500 guys from 32 different states at a primitive camping experience in the woods. It was kind of fun. So that's my deal, and I try to live life and laugh and have fun. That's me.
Yeah, man, I love your podcast is The Aggressive Life. It was funny. I was thinking about that. I started blogging in like 2007 or something like that. My first blog was The Intense Life. So I like The Aggressive Life better. But I love
intense,
the way,
as in you were in a tent, or it was intense. You were in multiple tents, or it was okay.
That's awesome. A few questions on your story. On the adoption front, you hear a lot of stories about, boys and girls that were adopted who basically really struggled with the fact that their parents didn't want them. It sounds like you had kind of an opposite experience because of the family that you were adopted into. Can you talk about that? And, did you struggle with that at all? Or because of the family you had, were you just good and didn't have any wounds from that?
My parents played it perfectly. I never remember learning when I was adopted. So it was perfect because they told me all the right things. They told me, you were loved, you were special, you were wanted, we wanted you. I heard that very, very early. They really did it well. And they also, what was great about it, which people are adopting today, and I hate to jump into something controversial, but this is a pretty common thing in adoption. I didn't have any contact with my birth mother or birth parents. None. And that's the way it should be. It would be utterly awful if when I was a kid and I was struggling with the discipline of my parents, if I was thinking, well, but if my other mother, if I was with her and I just saw her last month, or I was with her on Facebook or something like that, that would have really, really messed with my identity and messed me up. So I had a great experience being adopted and being a family. Now, having said that, the thing that is true is that there is a primal wound that goes to those of us who are adopted. Most of us have experienced this, where the person who we were with in symbiotic relationship with, pun intended, in the symbiotic fluid of my mother, when all of a sudden you're separated from her, and this sounds like psychobabble, sounds like it doesn't make sense, you feel rejection. I would always hear that and I would say, what are you talking about? I never felt rejected when I was, 14 or 15. I don't know what you're talking about. But then as you think about it, when you're age 40, I look back at age 40 and I realized, wow, there is absolutely a pattern of me acting like an orphan, of me being concerned that someone's going to reject me, of me overreacting when somebody leaves the church that I started, because it's like I feel like I'm rejected. So there's still a primal wound there that makes you very sensitive to people leaving you and walking out on you, which inversely causes you to be very, very loyal to anybody who's loyal to you. So that's some of the baggage that I have with being adopted.
Yeah. Any other advice you'd give to parents who are either thinking about adopting or that have adopted and are kind of navigating that? What would you say to them?
My first thing is, do not try to be enlightened and have two sets of parents. If they're adopting to you, great. Take the child. I think it is an awful decision to do that. And let me tell you why, from a spiritual standpoint. From a spiritual standpoint, the thing about kids is they need to be told who they are. Today we have parents who think it's a great idea to not even tell their kids what sex they are, don't even tell their kids what gender they are. Let them just decide on their own whether or not they're male or female. That's a horrible idea. You can tell your kids you're a good boy. You can tell your kids you're a good girl. You can tell them that. You telling them their identity is important. Jesus gets his identity from his heavenly Father, who says to him, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." He says that 2 times in his life, at his baptism and also the transfiguration. So you have to give your kids identity. And if your child is having multiple parents and has the possibility for multiple families, and they're able to see a person who they came out of that womb and they think in their mind, I could have been with that person, I'm telling you, that will wreck their identity. I don't know how I could have done it. To be disciplined by my parents and then wonder, yeah, but I wonder what Susan, my other mother, would have done. Yeah, but it's really rough. I actually met my birth mother a few years ago. I'm glad I did. She died not too long ago, unfortunately, just of old age and stuff like that. But I'm glad I was able to connect with her. But when I connected with her, the first meeting, she said, "You are a Haskins." She said, "Boy, that nose, that eye, I showed your picture, you are a Haskins." And even as a very self-confident 50-year-old, hearing someone tell me that I was something else, that I had a different name attached to me, was really rocking my world. I recoiled against it. I decided not to be rude to her, but I had to tell myself inside, no, I'm a Tome. I'm not a Haskins. I'm a Tome. I am a Tome. To be a child and in your mind be ping-ponging back and forth between 2 different sets of parents, or 2 mothers or 2 fathers, just brutal. So that's one thing I would say to anyone who's adopted. Just try as best you can to have your child in your family, period, and you get to be the one who sets their identity. Tell your child who they are. That relates to any parent. And beyond that, no, just be a great parent. Do the normal stuff. Love your kids, discipline your kids, train your child up in the way in which he should go, and when he grows older, he will not depart from it.
Yeah, I've never heard that perspective. It's pretty fascinating. You related being adopted, you talked about being adopted into the family of God. I actually learned about you through Denny Pattyn, who is the man who led you to Christ. Was the family you grew up in believers? Did I'm just curious, what did that look like? And how did Denny, a lot of people listening to this have listened to your interview with Denny and been impacted by it. How did Denny specifically impact you in such a way that changed your life forever?
My parents were churchgoers. They were Christians in the way in which they knew, which was churchgoers. And I speak in the past tense now. They're more than churchgoers. They're definitely followers of Jesus now. But growing up, they were just churchgoers. My mom played the organ. My dad sang in the choir. And as I aged, as I got older and older in life, I mean older and older, like as I got to be 7, 8, 9, 12, 15, I found myself at 15 in this church. My parents are up front doing organs and choir things. Just going, what in the world am I here for? This is insane. Looked over this old guy. I remember him. He was starting to fall asleep in the pew beside me. And I remember thinking to myself, what are you doing here? What, you obviously don't want to be here, and yet you're here. When I don't have to be here, I will not be here. Church had just so turned me off, and I associated church with Jesus. And Denny was, and it sounds trite to say, but he was a cool guy. He was a cool guy. He was around the high school. He had a Young Life club, and he just had a personality, and he would go to football games, and he would heckle me from on the bench while he was standing on the track outside the bench. Like, say, come on, Tome, do something. And it's just trying to build bridges by stupid humor, that kind of thing. And I learned from him what it meant to have a relationship with Christ versus an attachment to the Christian religion. Huge difference between the Christian religion and a relationship with Christ. So through him and him getting me involved in Young Life, because at that point he was a Young Life leader, my life was forever changed. I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, I'm curious on the whole Young Life Church thing. You obviously planted a church and decided, that was the way to go. But it seems like Young Life's focus is all in relationships, right? It's like relationship is the model, but friendship, or I forget they're saying, but you get it. It's all about relationships. Where church tends to be, hey, come and gather, come and see. What have you learned, or how did you implement that when you planted a church? I'm just curious how you viewed both
Yeah.
ministries.
Well, I don't know exactly what Young Life is now. I've interacted with folks who are in Young Life. It's obviously doing some really good things. I don't know if they still say the same phrases that they did. Oh gosh, how long ago is that? Believe it or not, the last Young Life meeting I was in was 40 years ago.
It's been a while.
Gosh, yeah, 16 to 56. But the big buzz phrases back then was you have to earn the right to be heard. It's about relationship. You start with the relationship. You earn the right to be heard. That was a big, big deal. Another big deal with Young Life is have fun. There should be a sense of humor, a sense of levity. Another thing about Young Life is leverage camps, leverage experiences that are outside of your normal thing. Another thing that was part of Young Life was talks that are relevant and real to life and kids can understand. Another thing was Young Life was music that is the kind of music kids want to sing to. Those are all radical concepts when you're coming from a very churchy background and you're not interested in God and you're 16-year-old. Like seriously, like mind blowing. There's humor in God and music I like, and there's an energy in the room. Wow. Those elements today should be applied to every church and every adult context there is. What adult doesn't want to have music that's in line with the kind of music he or she likes? What adult doesn't appreciate humor? What adult doesn't appreciate some sort of outlet for being a place where they're normally not, whether it's a camp or a mission trip or whatever it is? What do we have to do to be creative in our events? So Crossroads has been called before Young Life for Adults. Great, I'll take that. I think that's a high compliment. Young Life for Adults. I'll take that's what it is. We don't want to assume that anybody believes everything as soon as they walk in the door. We want to give them a positive experience where there's some humor. We want music that's in line with the style that they want to hear. We want to talk that is appropriate to where they are in life. Yeah, and I think that's part of why churches like ours are growing all across the country. People keep saying that the mega church is going to die. Big churches are going away. Man, people have been saying that for 50 years. Actually, I'll just say 30, 40 years, people have been saying that. And there's only more large churches, and all the large churches are only getting larger. There's something about how ministry is done this way that is attractive to the average human mindset.
Yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit about your leadership journey as well. It wasn't Denny. I forget who I was talking to. Someone that knew you, when you were in your 20s or however old you were when you hung out with Denny. And they were like, yeah, no one would have ever put money on Brian doing what he's doing today. So talk to us about, man, what did that journey look like from potentially someone with little potential to, leading one of the largest churches in America and everything else that you do?
I got to tell you, I am so thankful that you brought that up. I'm so thankful that you said what you said, because it's 100% true, Doug. It's 100% true. And it's only God gets the glory. I've said that to some people who are around me, and I don't think people really believe that. I think there is unfortunately a bit of a larger than life thing that gets attached to you if you lead a large thing. And so people think you're actually smarter and better than you actually are, or people think that you actually had some special leadership DNA that was dumped in you at birth that made you be able to do whatever you want. And I tell people that regularly. Nobody who knew me when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, nobody would have ever envisioned I would be doing the things that I am right now. I was utterly undisciplined, utterly and completely. Took me 7 years to get my 4-year degree. Not 7 years to be a doctor, 7 years to get a 4-year degree. 3 times I went through accounting 1. Nobody would have thought that I would have had any level of discipline to do anything or start anything. I was petrified to talk to people. I didn't have a personality or confidence to talk with folks. I went to one of my class reunions years and years ago, and I bumped into my very first girlfriend, first person I took out to a homecoming dance, and she said, "You just never talked. You just never talked."
Wow.
I didn't know how to interact with anybody. I was, my family was not all relational and conversational, and so I wasn't relational and conversational. I come from nuclear scientists and stuff like that, so I didn't have this like communication thing that was going on for me. I didn't have any sense of vision or future or something God was calling me to. All I knew was like, I think I'm going to hang out with kids and do student ministry. I could go on and on and on. So yeah, I'm glad, Doug, that you're another person who's heard that from somebody. I don't know who they are, but I'm not just trying to give an interesting story. To literally to God be the glory. Anything that's happening in and through me is solely because of how God has grown me, what God has given me, and what God has gifted me with. There's no natural DNA talent that has gone into doing what I'm doing right now. Well, I shouldn't say that. No.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I want to hit the other end. Yeah, it's like obviously God had to do a work, but something had to switch in you too. If you had no confidence, no ability to speak, clearly all of that has changed over the past however long it's been. What started to change? When did you start to see yourself as a leader or a potential leader? What did that growth journey look like from no confidence to where you are now?
The no confidence was just related to being able to have conversations with people and be around people of the opposite sex and that sort of thing. That was a big deal with that. But I do look at my past, and I can see that if I'm in front of a group of people and you just stick something in my hand and have me talk about it, I've been pretty good at that. That's a God-given ability that he's given me that wasn't unlocked until I received Christ and received the Holy Spirit. But that was there. That was one of those gifts, and I think that still exists today.
So that would be the speaking end, but even on the leadership end, I know you go from where you were at 20 to leading what you're leading today. What did that journey? Okay. Was it a big growth?
Okay. Well, there again, everything I led before I came to Cincinnati Star Crossroads failed. Everything I led.
Wow.
I never had a student ministry that everybody in the community was, that's the happening student ministry here in the community. Every time I had a goal for how many kids we were going to take to camp, it feels like we never got there. Anytime I had a dream for some event, the event never was the way it was. I worked hard. I really did. I worked hard, but maybe I worked in an undisciplined way. Maybe I just didn't put two and two together. Maybe God was preparing me with a lot of failure so that when I had success, he would get the glory and I wouldn't get the glory. I just gradually grew more fruitful. I was trying to be faithful, but I gradually grew more fruitful. The very first weekend the Crossroads started, March 25, 1996. We had this core group of 11 people. I'd gone out and recruited a bunch of other people to be in the core because we needed people to park cars, we need people to hold babies, set up, tear down inside this middle school, all that kind of stuff. And we wanted to have 200 people the very first weekend, which in 1996, in terms of church plants, that would be unbelievable to have 200 people. And we worked hard for it. We had some volunteers who were great in marketing. They were all 30 years old. We have some marketers at Procter & Gamble. They were working on our mailers. It wasn't any social media, those mailers. And we were stuffing these mailers and all these things. It was going on a big, huge thing for months, like trying to get. And then the night before we were going to start, I have this awful feeling in my stomach of, oh no, God, it's going to happen again. Oh, I know this feeling. There's big expectations. You work really hard and then it just doesn't work. And it's going to happen tomorrow. And I really grieve for all the people who are in the core group because I'm used to this. This happens to me all the time. But I'm just not used to this for them. I grieve for them. So I go in, we set up, I go sit in the front seat in the front row, and I decide that I'm not going to turn around and look behind me, because if I turn around and look behind me, and when I see a sparsely filled room, I'm just going to get depressed and it's going to throw me off my game. So I'm just going to stay there. I'm going to look at the music. I'm just going to stay doing that, and I'll get up and do my preaching when I get up preaching. Well, we have this volunteer come up. His name is Steve Andrew. And he whispers in my ear as the music is going. He says, hey, when you get up there, have everybody squeeze in so we can seat everybody. And I turned around in this 600-seat auditorium. I just saw a bunch of people. I was like, wow. That was really, really cool. Wow. And I can't say, Doug, what I did differently from that moment to a year earlier when I lived in Pittsburgh. I can't say what I did. I think things just caught. Was it God was preparing me by not allowing me to have success so I would remain humble? Was it there was a gradual accumulation of leadership skills that they started to build on each other and finally caught? Was it that I was in environments where there was unhealthy things happening that was holding back the thing that I was trying to start? I don't know which one of those three or which combination of those three it was, but I can't say like that was the leadership decision that I stumbled on and then I took off from there. It was just a gradual accumulation of leadership and just diligently applying it.
Yeah, I love what you said. Maybe God was preparing you with a lot of failure for when you had success. If you had to speak to leaders today, maybe someone listening who they feel like you probably felt in your 20s, that everything I touch seems to fail. It's never what I want it to be. Man, I just want to throw in the towel and give up. What would you say to them?
One, I get it. That's where I was. Although I would never say I'm going to throw in the towel. I just didn't have a quit bone in me. So frustration was there, but there just wasn't any turning back. You have to feel, and you have to personally own versus, and like when Jesus says, put your hand to the plow and don't look back. People who are in ministry and are considering getting out of ministry are never fruitful in ministry. You no matter how crappy it is or frustrating it is, if you're called, you gotta put your hand to the plow and just go forward. So the second thing I would say to those who are frustrated, to feel like throwing the towel, especially those who are in their 20s, if you just stay in the game and you stay teachable, you're going to be awesome in a few years just because other people who are better than you will have quit by then. And you'll be the only option left for someone to follow you. I mean, really, like there's plum jobs that are going to open up. There's plum opportunities that are going to open up because there's very few people that have any semblance of discipline and integrity to stay in the game. So just stay in the game. It was really, really weird, Doug. When Crossroads started, I was just the weird guy in Cincinnati who was doing things that people weren't doing. Now we do things like churches do all the time. But when we started, no one was doing produced videos in service. No one. No one was having their sound be at 110 decibels during worship. No one was giving out free coffee and bringing it into the worship. And when I say no one, I mean no one. And no one was giving away free cassette tapes of the week's message and buying duplicate and giving them away, not selling them. When I say no one, I mean no one. And that innovation kind of drove us for a bit and also caused us to be seen as very avant-garde, very irreverent, very risky. We would play clips from R-rated movies. Back in the days, you'd go to Blockbuster. You'd get a Blockbuster tape the night before, and you'd cue it up, and you'd put it in the VCR, and you would actually play a scene. like,
That's beautiful.
you ever see What About Bob?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so what about Bob? Bill Murray. He's got this. He has this. This part where he's trying to convince the doctor that he's crazy, and he has this scene where he says, "There's two kind of people in the world: those who like Neil Diamond and those who don't like Neil Diamond."
Yep.
He does. Do you remember that whole scene?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
do you remember that? He's with Richard. Okay, so okay, great. We'll use this to illustrate somebody who's deluded. So he had it queued up, put in the VCR. What I didn't realize, or we didn't realize, is once you have it queued up and you put it in the thing, it rewinds like 2-3 seconds, and in that 2-3 seconds, that's when he was telling the doctor that he had Tourette's syndrome. So I start this thing in the church. He goes, I don't know what the listeners are in your audience. So on my podcast, I would swear, son of a just somebody, he comes in, and then there's two type of people in this world. It's in church, and I'm like, oh my gosh, son of a that is not good church right there, right? So anyway, I had this reputation of, just being irreverent guy on the edge, loose cannon. And then what do you know? All of a sudden, and I do mean all of a sudden, like I think for 10 years, Crossroads was maybe 10 years, 15 years old, and I was the longest tenured senior pastor in the entire city of Cincinnati.
Wow.
Except for one or two folks who were in African American contexts, Damon Lynch Sr., as an example. And I just say it back to your question. I just say that to say very few people have staying power. So if you convince yourself you're going to stay, you convince yourself you're going to walk closely with your God, which will always mean you will have incremental improvement, incremental leadership. That is a flywheel that hopefully by God's grace will eventually catch for you. But for many people, they never see it catch because they're always jumping on the next fad, thinking it's the next program that's going to do it. They're not dealing with things of character and things of the heart. And they don't stick around long enough to actually see success.
You're not going to believe this, but yeah, I was in youth ministry in like 2000. I don't know what year it was, like 2008. And we went on a ski trip or something like that. And I was in charge of bringing movies. And literally I brought What About Bob? Because I'm like, oh, that's a good movie. So I throw it in that exact scene you're talking about where he says he has Tourette's. It just starts going off and all these kids just turn around and look at me. It was absolutely beautiful. That's so funny.
You had the exact same thing, the exact same scene?
Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Awesome.
That's great.
I want to talk to you about character development. You talked about a lot of people who don't stay in the game. Sometimes it's because they throw in the towel and they quit. Other times it's because of moral failure. I have a few questions on character, but I guess just big picture, how can leaders grow and develop their character in a way that actually sustains them to get to their finish line? I actually just listened to your podcast with Steve Carter, and I forget the other pastor's name, about the rise and fall of Marcel. Yeah. And it was just like, man, there was a guy that made it to the finish line intact. And it's like, man, how can we have more leaders do that? What would you say?
Boy, Doug, it sounds so trite, but it's really simple, as to walk humbly with your God. I think having a goal of finishing well is fine. Better than the goal of not finishing well, right? I think having a goal of finishing well, but simply having a goal to not morally screw up is not going to build a great life. But when you walk humbly with your God, you stay in teachable mode. And you never get carried away with any sense of success or importance that you might have. That's where people lose it right there, is they don't walk humbly before their God. I think it came up in that podcast you just mentioned. There's a number of people who some would say, well, I never saw it coming when that guy went down. And when you get older and you've been around the block a few times, which I am now, you say things that you can say that you aren't a total just jerk when you would have said it when you were, 24. But when someone, I never saw it coming, a couple of these guys, I go, you're kidding, right? I did. How did you not see this coming? How did you not see this coming? I talked with the guy, and he's always looking over my shoulder to see if there's somebody more important than me that he wants to talk to. What do you mean you didn't see this coming? What do you mean you didn't see it coming? That his staff adores him and applaud. There's someone I know when they walk into a room, the staff is taught to stand and applaud, and that's what they do. There's some just really weird stuff that happens because people are not walking humbly with their God. When you walk humbly with your God, those things just aren't going to have any place with you. I'm not saying you're going to be sinless, but those things are what will keep you strong and will enable you to finish strong. Billy Graham had those things, right? And he finished strong. Ravi Zacharias. I mean, I remember the first time I heard Ravi Zacharias, it's like, what a jerk. I mean, to go back and listen to Ravi, he was always condescending whenever he spoke. He was condescending, like, if you don't believe this, look how much smarter I am. And he never said that, but he was very condescending. And Christians would overlook that, because what he said was so good if we just wrote it down. But he was incredibly condescending and incredibly prideful. At least that's the way I took him to be. And look how he finished. I have a good friend of mine who idolized Ravi Zacharias. He said, I actually read the 3,000-page report that came out that the organization had audited. And this friend of mine said, that's really weird. He was like a spiritual hero of mine, and I don't even think the guy was a Christian. I said, you're kidding. Why? And he started telling me things that were in this 3,000-page report that were actions and attitudes that he had committed for decades. And like, how can somebody walking with Christ do these things repeatedly for decades? Walk humbly with your God. Never be impressed with yourself. Never feel like you're the smartest person in the room. Best idea has to win, not your idea. Best idea has to win. I love my team, and they know I tell them, hey, love to be wrong. I love to be wrong. I love to be wrong when somebody else has an idea that I thought was a bad idea, and we go with it, and that was the right thing. You gotta love to be wrong. You have to love the right thing to happen instead of have your thing happen.
You mentioned earlier that, you've always been a little bit edgy, and I'm just curious, like I was laughing at the Steve Carter interview that you did. You basically cracked open a beer to start the conversation. As a leader, I've seen you, talk about things that I wouldn't hear other leaders talk about, which I admire in you. When it comes to like drinking, swearing, talking about issues, how have you viewed that as your leadership? I know there's camps that would be like, oh, that's great. And then there's camps that would be like, what's wrong with Brian? I'm just curious your viewpoint on that.
Yeah, well, the New Testament says, do the work of evangelist, endure suffering, fulfill your ministry. Fulfill your ministry. I think we miss this. We think that all of us have to have Billy Graham's ministry, or all of us have to have name your favorite megachurch pastor ministry, or name your favorite student ministry, or name, if your mission work, Mother Teresa's ministry. You have to fulfill your ministry, not my ministry, your ministry. Who is it that you are called to reach, and what is the ministry God's called you to have? So my ministry is to speak the native tongue of the average dude to try to reach and grow that person that isn't going to be reached and grown by other really good folks. And I happen to like beer, and I happen to drink. And so I'm not going to hide that. I'm actually going to have events called Man Camp, where we have intense prayer, and we have 4 dozen kegs of beer that were kicked the last time, among 1,500 guys, That's my ministry, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. I'll let a 4-letter word slip out every once in a while. I don't think they've ever happened on stage at Crossroads on Sunday. The reputation is there, but I'll let a 4-letter word come out, and I'll do it intentionally, not for shock value, because I feel it reaches people. I'll give you an example. I won't use the word, but you'll know what I'm talking about, just because I have some sensibilities. Psalms, there's different categories of Psalms. The Psalms are wisdom literature. The Psalms are not supposed to be used to form your theology. Like Psalm 5:5, Psalm 10:5 talks about God hating people. And I don't think that that's right for us to use those as a part of our theology. There's certain people that God hates. What's to be understood there is that the psalmist, David, or other people who are doing the Psalms, are processing in prayer things before God, there is good theology in the Psalms. You just got to be really careful. Like Psalms also said, David says, bash their infants' heads against the rocks. You're not going to find a theology that says, well, here's a situation where infants' heads should be bashed against rocks. No, God, he is lamenting. David is how he's mad, he's angry, he's frustrated. And so he's going to God and crying out to God, saying, God, I'm so frustrated. I could bash their infants' heads against rocks. This is what our prayer needs to be. We need to get away from nicety prayers and actually talk to God the way we want to talk to him, actually give him what our actual feelings are. And so at a man camp event recently, I talked about the last year and a half of my life just being hard and awful. It's just kicked my up one side of the field and down the other. COVID, race stuff, debates about policy, politics, masks, vaccines, people not happy about this. And I said, I go before God in prayer. More than ever, I just gone to him. It's kind of like, that's a literal prayer. I pray, it's just lamenting, like, oh, it's a cry. My heart's frustrated, right? If David can pray, bash the heads of infants against rocks, and he's not judged by Christians, can I just say that? But and most guys, when they hear that, go, I get that, I understand it. Wow, I get that, helps me go. And there's a lot of people that's very hurtful to them, and that harms their sensibilities, and they disagree with that. And they go to churches and they listen to people that is their ministry to speak a language that they understand. So I'm not trying to say, here's why you should have alcohol and swearing a part of your life. I am saying, if you're going to have a fruitful ministry, you have to figure out what your ministry is. So eventually you have to stop being a cover band. Cover bands are great to go listen to. People like cover bands, but cover bands don't change the world. You got to figure out your own music.
There's a mic drop right there. The other thing I think about getting to your finish line is not burning out. And I was actually just reading, I think I read somewhere that you, in the second year of Crossroads, determined that you would take, I forget, it was like 7 or 8 weeks off of summer. And I think you've done that every year. Correct me if I'm wrong. And now, it's revolutionary now that, pastors should take a sabbatical every 7 years. It seems like you kind of implemented that rhythm early before anyone I heard was doing it. Can you talk about that and what your advice would be to leaders in taking time off, not burning out?
Yeah, I did that. I got that. I got that advice from Bill Hybels at Willow Creek, who was somebody who didn't finish well, but a lot of things that Bill said were right in the money and very helpful to me, and that was one of them. So yeah, I've been taking 6 to 8 weeks off every year since the second or third year of the church, and you got to be humble to do that, because you look like a real jerk to people in the church when you start doing that. You look like you're just lazy, like you're just trying to phone it in, because people are like, they go, well, geez. And you feel like you have to justify why you do that. And so I would justify it. I would read a book a day or a book every 4 days and take notes so I'd have something to preach. And I would give people reasons why I was doing it. And then eventually it would get to the place where someone would say, it must be nice. I would go, it is nice. Yes. It's awesome. Very nice. Yes. Thank you. Yes. And thank you. And you should do it too. And guess what? You could do this. People don't realize you could do this. You could go to your employer and make it part of your compensation, have that much time off. Or if they don't want to give you that much time off, you could buy those weeks. You could do this. And because I'm lasting and I'm thriving, that's just something I'm going to keep doing. And I have kept doing. I've been at the wheel for a while, and if I didn't have that amount of time off, I know that I couldn't be at the wheel. A number of years ago, I thought about changing it, and a good friend of mine said, man, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't change it. That sounds kind of like the bipolar person who starts feeling good and they feel like they can go off their meds. Wow. You probably need to stay with that regimen, and I have.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: you talk about leaders. Sorry, that's just my story in that. The reason why people don't take time to play, and I don't mean take time off, hear me very clearly. Sabbath is not taking time off so you can catch up on your email. Sabbath is not taking time off so you can read a Christian book to help yourself in leadership or get some more content for something you're going to speak on. Sabbath is doing something you wouldn't otherwise do. It's something that is playful. You mentioned my podcast. I had somebody on recently who quoted Winston Churchill. The Winston Churchill said, "He who works with his mind rests with his hands." And so taking time off for me means I'm doing something active. I'm riding a motorcycle. I'm working on my truck. I'm doing a house project. I'm camping. I'm overlanding, something like that. You have to figure out what is recreation for you that recreates you. And you've got to do that and do it regularly. And if God doesn't see you doing that, he's unhappy. No parent wants to see their kid studying 24/7. No parent wants to see their kid and they take them on vacation and they go to the beach wanting to stay in and work on his term paper. No parent would say this is unhealthy. God's saying that to many of us because he wants to see us laughing and take time off. It's critical.
Yeah, it's evident throughout our time together that you're passionate about men. You do a lot. You do Man Camp, you mentioned. You've written several books for men, including your recent devotional called Move. Where did this passion for men come? What are you doing about it? What's your message? What do you want men to know?
Well, I'm passionate about women. I actually like women a lot more than I like men. I'm married to one. I've got 2 daughters. Crossroads has as many or more women than we have men. So I feel like I need to say that. Like, yeah. I sometimes get pigeonholed by some and like, oh, well, you're the man guy. You're the John Eldridge kind of guy. I'm not men's ministry guru. I do focus more on men than women in terms of thinking, leadership, decision, and preaching, because men aren't being reached, because men aren't being developed. That's part of my ministry, and I would say it needs to be part of more churches' ministry. The average church is overrun and overwhelmed with women. The church of women, for women, led by women. And I'm okay with all that, by the way. I believe women should lead. I believe women should teach. I believe women should be in the ruling class of the church as elders. That puts me in the minority in some camps, but I do. I am pro all that. My daughter is one of our community pastors. So I have a high view of women. And because I have a high view of women, I have a real hurt over a lack of godly men that are aligning with women. There's just more good women than there are good men in the church. And that's because the church has been oriented that way. If a man-eating lion came into a church, it would die of starvation. Because there's just not many men. There's some males there, but there's just not many men as a percentage as there are women. We just know this, right? I met with a Christian agent, a book agent, just before we had the podcast interview. 90% of Christian books are bought by women. Women are the ones reading the Christian books. Women are the ones who are in the pews or in the auditorium chairs. Women are the ones who the Bible studies are written for and take off. Women are the ones that have the conferences. Why? Because you can monetize a woman's conference. You can't monetize a men's conference. No one's done that since Promise Keepers, because women are just more open to that. So, yeah, I do have a calling to try to run after the one, and the one versus the 99. The one is male, because there's plenty of people reaching women. There's not many people who have the tongue of a man that are able to reach men alongside their wife.
So good. And we'll include links to all of your books that I'd highly recommend any man listening. Please go out and purchase those. With the time we have left, I want to jump into the lightning round, which I know you have your own lightning round as well. Some people listen to your being short and some people don't, but just a bunch of fun questions. I do want to start with adventure though. I love following you on Instagram. Encourage everyone to follow you. You're always on an adventure, man. I'm like, dang, it must be nice. So
yes, it is. It's very nice. It's very nice. Yes. Thank you.
So, man, and
well, let me stop right there. The adventure, that is true. Yeah. It is nice. I'm not real world for people to model their life after me at this point relative to adventure. Okay, I'm 56. I'm in my prime income earning years. I'm earning more money than I ever have. This is my prime earning years now. And all my kids are out of the house, and all my kids are married, and all the college loans are paid off, all that stuff. And on top of that, I've worked for 25 years to build an organization that takes stuff off my plate and can enable me to function when I go do adventures. Very few people have all those things line up. So I just hope when someone looks at my Instagram feed that they don't feel like they need to be out doing as much stuff as I am away from their gig. I'm in a unique season of life.
Yeah, no, I love it. And hey, that just gave a bunch of us young leaders vision for where we could be. But on the adventure side, and actually, I was going to say your bucket list. I read a post you did. You're like, I don't have a bucket list. I have a to-do list, which I was like, boom. But of the things you've done, what is something you've done or a few things you've done that you think everyone should experience before they die?
Absolute. I don't care who you are. If you're in America, you need to get your ass to the Grand Canyon. It is the greatest thing in America. It's stunning. People from all over the world go, and there's people who live in Flagstaff, an hour away, who've never been to the Grand Canyon. You must go to the Grand Canyon. It is, in case you don't know, it's a canyon, and it is grand, is what it is. That's one. The second one, if you're a motorcycle rider, you need to ride to Alaska and back.
Wow. All right. What's something left on your to-do list that you haven't done yet, or the bucket list?
Well, as I said in something you heard me, I don't have an ongoing running list that I'm checking off. I have something to cross, like, ooh, I need to do that. And then I make sure I do that as soon as I can and try to figure it out. So the one thing that's on my list right now for that I'm working on is a hunting trip to Alaska.
Awesome. All right. What's the best advice you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
Steve Sjogren, former pastor at the Vineyard Church in Cincinnati, talked to me before I started Crossroads, and he said, every day when you look in the mirror, tell yourself, you are a gatherer. You're not a pastor, you're not an orator, you are a gatherer. You get up every day, you need to gather people to the vision.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
Make aggressive mistakes.
Best purchase you've made in the last year for $100 or less?
Ooh, $100 or less. These are good questions. Dirt, are you hearing these? These are good questions, Dirt. You ought to be looking over my producer over there who helps me with mine. That's good stuff. $100 or less. I'm going to go with a massive size bag. And I say massive, I'm saying it's got about 100 pairs of earplugs in it. Massive, huge. Earplugs are the secret to sleeping when you're outside of your bed.
Interesting. Top, it could be one or two, top book that's impacted you and you find yourself giving away most often.
That would change every month. That would change every month. Okay, right now, I think the most recent book that John Mark Comer came out with, called Live No Lies,
so good,
is utterly fantastic.
Favorite podcast other than your own?
I go in cycles on those as well. It depends on what I'm into that month or that. Why is this so hard?
You can name three. It's fine.
Okay, the ones I ping pong back and forth to: XO Mountain Gear. They sell backpacks, and it's a hunting podcast. Stephen Mansfield podcast, the 15-minute thing on politics and current events, and Art of Manliness. Those are my three most regular podcasts I listen to.
I haven't heard any of them, so I'll check them out. Thank you. Do you have a favorite failure that led to success or an important lesson?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, just about everything I did before I came to Cincinnati was a failure. One failure that we had was our very first Christmas show that we did. It was just awful. It's called Imagine, and you can't imagine how awful it was. It was really, really bad. But we tried to do our own Christmas show, and it was a try. And then the next year, we totally changed it, tried another one, and we kept tweaking it. And then that thing became awaited. which is played off Broadway or at a local house like the Aeronaut Theater in Cincinnati. And last time we ran it at our sites at Crossroads, we had 115,000 people attend, being looked into, being made into a movie right now.
Wow.
And all of that came out of the failure of trying something that didn't work at all, called Imagine.
It's amazing. What's your greatest leadership pet peeve?
It is stunning to me, after all these years, I'm still the guy that still notices paper in the parking lot and stops and picks up the paper.
Wow.
I'm still the guy that notices when I'm in a room that the Cove baseboard is coming unglued and needs to be handled. So it's a pet peeve that I would have thought that more people would notice those things and be picking up and doing those things. And I'm still doing it. And I don't know if that's just because that's the owner mindset that'll always be with you, or if I haven't developed people to be able to notice those things. That's a massive pet peeve, which, by the way, that's an amazing book for your listeners, talking about leadership, the ownership. What's that called, Derek? The owner's dilemma, I think is what it is. And they talk about that, how a founder is an owner, and when an organization doesn't have an owner mindset, it goes down.
You get to spend time with a lot of high quality leaders, interview them on your podcast. Do you have a question that you always ask when you get to meet with someone that you look up to? Bill Hybels in the past, et cetera.
Yeah, I think I like asking them a couple things. I just give them an open-ended question. What is it you think I need to know? One guy I asked that to, he said, you need to know that you'll never have the same money as the people you do ministry to have. He was talking to student ministry. He said, these kids are going to have tennis shoes that their parents are going to buy them. They're going to be more expensive than the ones you're going to be able to afford. And he told me, I was like, yeah, interesting. Okay. He told me that when I was 19 years old, I think it was. And here I am, 56, making great jack, but I'm still with people who got more than me and have stuff that I don't have. And that is just very, very true. So you never know what you're going to get when you ask a leader, what is it you think that I should know? The second thing I like asking is, what's God teaching you now? You know, Jesus says, my Father is always at work up to the present time, and I too am working. So I like hearing how Jesus is working inside of other leaders, because it might be a clue of what God wants to work inside of me.
So what is God doing in your life right now? What's he teaching you?
I think he's teaching me about the role of father. My role of father in many ways is done because I don't have any kids in the house, but all of us still want to be fathered well by our dad, or parented well by our mom. But I'm also seeing how God is still fathering me, how God is still nurturing me, and how I need to turn around and be a father, at least from afar, to a lot of people.
Last two questions. If you can go back and have coffee with 20-year-old Brian, who apparently had no potential, what would you tell him?
Oh, that's good. I think I would tell him, hey, man, I come from the future. I would tell him, hey, man, I come from the future, and let me tell you, you're going to be fine. Stop comparing yourself to other people and thinking that you're getting behind, and thinking that the right opportunities are not coming your way and you're being left in the dust. You're going to be fine. Just keep doing the right things, and eventually things will fall in place.
And on the other side of your life, when you get to the end, what do you want to be remembered for?
That question has changed, Doug. So when I was 30, I would have answered that in some such way of, I want people to say, hey, Cincinnati was different because of that guy. It was different. Now where I am, I want to be just counted among those people who lived a faithful, fruitful, and fulfilling life and finished well.
Wow. Anything else you want to leave leaders with today?
You need to find out what your ministry is and fulfill your ministry, and be open to other people misunderstanding it and not supporting it. But if you have some people who are close to you and they know you and they walk with God and they can help you verify and go in that direction, you just do that and things are going to be just okay or great.
Brian, this hour exceeded my expectations. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for your leadership in the world. It matters. And hopefully we get to do this again sometime.
My pleasure, Doug. Great questions. Made me go down memory lane and go internal in a way that I haven't for a while. So you're a good interviewer and you got a good podcast here. I'm honored to be on it.
Well, hey, leader, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Brian Tome. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can find ways to connect with him and links to everything that we discussed in the show notes at l3leadership.org/294. Well, hey, leader, the new year is coming up, and I'm sure you're starting to think about what goals you're going to set and how you want to grow in the new year. And if you really want to 10x your growth, I want to challenge you to either launch or join an L3 Leadership Mastermind group in the new year. Mastermind groups have been the greatest source of growth in my life over the last 6 years. And if you're unfamiliar with what they are, they're just simply groups of 6 to 12 leaders that meet together for at least 1 year in order to help each other grow, hold each other accountable, achieve goals, and to do life together. So if you're interested in learning more about masterminds, go to l3leadership.org/masterminds. And as always, I like to end with a quote, and I'll actually quote a scripture that Brian talked about in the interview because I loved it so much. In 2 Timothy 4:5, it says this: "But you should keep a clear mind in every situation. Don't be afraid of suffering for the Lord. Work at telling others the good news and fully carry out the ministry God has given you, your ministry." I hope this episode encouraged and challenged you. Know that Laura and I love you. We believe in you. Keep going. Keep making a difference. Don't quit, leader. The world needs you to lead. We'll talk to you next episode.